within a month. You're watching Pitch2Production, the show where we take a random idea and turn it into a film, all within a month. Now, without further ado, lights, camera, action. This is Pitch2Production, the show where we make a film and try to have it done by a month. Now, it is the first show of February and there is no film one yet. You know, I just been super busy and I'm trying to figure everything out, but I have good news to report that we do have a film 2 in the works as of right now. So unfortunately, this was a school assignment, so there isn't a randomized factor like there was in January, but stay tuned for March because we will definitely be throwing dice for that one again. So for now, I want to talk to you guys about the pitch and the treatment of this film that I'm working on called Dog Ear. Now, Dog Ear is a romantic film. It was my first time, or it is my first time working with romance, so I'm a little excited to do it. And I want to show you guys how I like to write treatments, and maybe this is how you would like to do it too if you're interested in script writing and storyboard writing and stuff like that. So, without further ado, let me show you what I have on screen here. So, I'm going to trust that you guys can see the screen because I can't see what's going on. You know, it's a new thing for everything, time for everything, you know. So, this film is called Dog Ear, and the reason I decided to call it Dog Ear was because it's a romance set in a library, and the main character bends the corners of the book instead of using a bookmark like you should do. So that's called dog earing because, you know, like a dog, some dogs have ears like this, right? So I decided to call it Dog Ear, and there's a thing that we use for like film and stuff like that to pitch to other directors or just people that might be interested in the process called logline, right? Or it's to basically get people interested because you don't want to, let's say, stop like a director in the middle of like, you know, like let's say an elevator or a street. It's literally called elevator pitch. You don't want to stop them there and then have to explain to them the story for like 30 minutes, right? They don't have that type of time, and you might not even have that type of time, right? So log lines are meant to get people interested, not just like people that are that you hope to help produce with you, but also the audience members themselves. Because if you have a synopsis that's like, you know, 6 pages long, then nobody's really gonna read that, right? So log lines, the one I have here is: a speechless librarian and a forgettable man try to connect without words. Will he hear her voice? Will she remember him? And the idea is to have a woman that can't speak, she is deaf, find love with a man that's trying to love her back in a way. It's a story about communication and different types of communication. And the reason why I decided to go with a deaf person was because the assignment, again, school project, the assignment was to have no dialogue or very little dialogue at all. It's all about the eyes. So I want to tell a story about the eyes and the face and the body movements and the settings and stuff like that, not just what comes out of the actors' mouths. Because a story can be told without dialogue. Obviously, Charlie Chaplin or whatever, right? So now, when I was working on the script, right, I've already done script and stuff like that. I'll talk about that next week. When I was working on the script and the characters, I knew I wanted to have a deaf person to justify why people are not speaking, but I didn't want to come off as I didn't know what I was talking about, because personally I've never had a deaf person close to me in like my family or anything like that, so I can't really take their experiences. But what I did do, which might also be helpful for understanding the setting of your world, is do a lot of research. And with that, I found out that deaf people don't necessarily hear nothing. They do hear a tiny bit, but it is very like watered down. There's different types of deafness too. I did not know that before going into this project. And I want to convey that as accurately as possible so that I don't end up tropey or cliched or anything like that, right? Obviously it's a romance, so it can kind of be subject to cliches, but I want to try to put a realistic spin on it. If you couldn't tell already, I like telling the more realistic side of things. Not that I don't like fantasy, it's just that I want to explore different perspectives that I can physically see, right? So not without further ado, I already said that, but moving on, I want to move to the actual characters, right? So for me, I like to write realistic types of stories, but not everybody likes to do that, right? Some people love like writing fantasy, but a good thing you want to do is to have the character breakdowns. You have the characters break down so that you know how to work with them, because a character is much like a person, except it's just through your perspective and changed a bit, but they are a person if you want to make that realistic experience, right? So the three people that I'm going to have, or three characters I'm going to have in the story are Calliope, who is the deaf woman. She is going to be a librarian, and I decided to do, like she's a bit more reserved, but nonetheless, she is busy as a librarian. I decided to make her a bit more reserved because if she is deaf and she has a hard time communicating with people, there are very extroverted deaf people, don't get me wrong, but for this character, I wanted to have like a barrier between her, like a justifiable barrier. Like if she's trying to communicate with someone and they're not willing to communicate back, then how is she supposed to have a great experience with communicating with people, right? And what if that happened almost every time except for family and friends, right? What if that happened often? She would probably be a bit more reserved in showing, her side of things herself, right? So I wanted to explore that. And because of that, she can come off as a bit aloof, which means that she can come off as a bit standoffish or like in her own space. But in order to also justify why this is a romance, she's hopelessly romantic. Because if I had like, oh, she's closed off to romance, it's just a bit harder to make it believable to the audience why the main character who is Juji, is, why they're even interacting in the first place. It would be hard to justify that. So Juji, or Julian, is in his 20s and he moves at a fast pace. So he's like Calliope. I want to establish some similarities, but the difference is that he can, the difference is that he doesn't really, he's more passionate. I will say that. I imagine him to be more passionate. I should have put it here. He's also hopeless romantic, but he's the one that actually goes to Calliope. But I didn't want to do like that thing where like opposites attract, because I do believe that opposites do attract, but after a certain point, it turns to like, then why are we together in the first place if we have nothing in common? So I wanted to establish that there is common ground between the two. He is the main character. Calliope is the main ally, or if you want to say deuteragonist, I say that too. They are deuteragonists, right? Because it's not just a story about Julian chasing after Calliope, it's them trying to meet each other, and you'll see that more in the treatment that I established. So before I go on to the next character, who's Kurt, I want to establish what 20s race varial somewhat stocky means, right? If you see next to the name, there's like parenthetical descriptions. So 20s, you want to establish the character's age so that when you're casting for actors, which I'm doing now, when you're casting for actors, you know who to look for, and they know who to look for when they're doing the role. Because if you say nothing, right? If you say nothing about what the character looks like, and let's say a person that looks nothing like what you envision comes in and does a slam job, right? Either you're going to have to, what's the word I'm looking for? Compromise? Yeah, you're going to have to compromise or settle with yourself, or the actor is going to do a slam job, know they did a slam job, and then when you say no, they're going to be like, well, that's what it is, or why? And then they might come back and say, oh, you didn't specify, this looks bad on your part, because it will look bad on your part, right? So 20s, race varial, and somewhat stocky. You want to do age, race, and body type. And the reason why I did race variable is because I don't have the resources to make like casting calls and have a ton of people want to be in my film. So I like to put race variable for now because it invites everybody. And this isn't a story where like it is very racially specified, because that is a thing And I do write stories like that where it's like the Black experience or like the Hispanic experience or the white experience, stuff like that, right? But I knew that this isn't a story that isn't bound by race or bound by class. It's just about two students who are in love and try to communicate with each other. So that's why I put race variable. Somewhat stocky, body type. So again, the actor knows what you're looking for and they can come in and audition for you, right? So now that that's out of the way, let's move on to Kurt. Now, Kurt's gonna be the main, not antagonist, but he is the main obstacle. So Kurt is also another librarian like Calliope. And he looks a bit older, race variable, and he's imposingly big. So he serves as a physical or a visual obstacle to the audience. Like, oh, Juji would have to surpass this in order to get Calliope, right? And you also see that the obstacle kind of works against Calliope too, because Kurt is a very professional guy. So he's Kurt in judging, name him Kurt because Kurt, the word, right? Kurt in judging, imposing, and a no-nonsense type of person. So if Calliope is wasting time trying to get with Juji, Kurt would probably try to stop her and say, look, we're on salary here. We need to finish this by whatever, right? So those are my three characters. And now that I have that out of the way, I guess I can go a little bit to why I named the characters. Just a tiny little thing. Juji apparently means like heap of love in a different language. I thought that was fitting and it's memorable, the name Juji. Calliope apparently in Greek means beautiful voice. I thought that was a bit ironic because she is deaf, but the goal of the story is to establish that even though you're deaf, you still have you still have a voice, and Juji hears that voice at the end, so beautiful voice. And Kurt, the most obvious one because he is Kurt. He is not crass, but he is very like, again, as I said before, no nonsense, right? He'll tell it like it is. And then I put in extra because there's there's extras in there. So next up, I'm gonna show you the synopsis of the story. So I'm not gonna read all three paragraphs, but what I basically wrote was that Juji has a bad habit of folding pages in school books. So this establishes a character trait, and then Calliope, he gives the book to Calliope, or he tries to communicate with Calliope, a lonely librarian who can't speak. So they are repeatedly stopped by various challenges, aka Kurt, or maybe there's just a difference in schedule. And I established that during different scenes, which I'll talk about more in the scripting phase, which is next week, right? They're stopped by Kurt, and they aren't able to properly communicate with each other. So Juji goes to Calliope after a couple days and sees that Kurt actually is signing to her, right? So I want to say that like Calliope obviously is deaf, right? But she needs to be able to communicate with somebody. And in a library, you might think it's like slow paced, but it's actually kind of quick because people need books now. It's quicker than you think it is, right? So sure, she can write to Kurt, but it'd be faster for him to sign. So he picked up signing maybe a long time ago. I don't have to establish that, but that's how they communicate. And Juji sees that Calliope communicates with Kurt via ASL. So he decides to learn it. He decides to learn it through like online and stuff like that. And he can't really pick it up. So he tries to communicate with Calliope, hoping that what he learned would work, and it doesn't. And that's how I established like the main conflict of the story. It's wanting to communicate but not having the same language to communicate. And they do write to each other, and I do establish that they do write to each other, if that's what you're asking. But the reason why it doesn't really work is because, again, they are so busy that they can't pass notes to each other, but it's quicker to sign. You know what I mean? So Juji tries to communicate with Calliope, doesn't really work out, and Juji leaves. Calliope stays, and Calliope thinks that it's just like another interaction where, oh, the person doesn't really want to communicate with me because they found that it's hard to, right? She's used to people not wanting to go out of their way and do hard things to help communicate with her. So she's, that's why she's so standoffish. The last line I leave off in the synopsis is trying to grow closer together. They only grow farther and farther apart because they are really trying to connect. But the more that they try to connect, the more they realize that, there isn't a way to until Juji learns how to do ASL. So now that we have the synopsis out of the way, I guess the reason why I didn't have like the ending of the synopsis shows the full story, but the reason I didn't is because you guys are watching this and I want to, you know, hold some suspense for you, right? So I'm going to next show you the, I'll skip that paragraph, don't pause it, but I'll show you the scene list now, but I want to do that after commercial break because it is a lot. And I'm not even going to show you everything, but it's good to know, or good to know how to do a scene list so that you can dissect it into storyboarding later. And it's cool to see if you're interested in seeing the creative process, right? So until after break, I'll see you in a bit.
Being a successful woman in business means having the courage to own who you are. We understand the challenges faced by women, and we are here to help. Our team is here to develop the best strategy designed just for you. Your path is unique, and with the right tools, you can accomplish your dream.
How many minutes do I have left?
From radio to TV, from podcasting to magazines, we create the visibility to
17 minutes in or 17 minutes left? Okay, cool.
At New Dawn Media, we are here to help bring your message
forward. Can you give me like, when it's 3, can you send somebody to tell me 3?
It is time for your message to be seen and your voice
3
to be
minutes.
heard.
3 minutes left of the show.
Contact us at 866
Oh wait, you can hear me through the mic, right?
5422 or brooklyncafe.tv. Your voice can make a difference.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of the Brooklyn Cafe TV show. Whether you enjoy watching in the mornings or afternoons, you can now watch with your favorite merchandise. Choose from the Brooklyn Cafe t-shirts, ranging from sizes small to 3XL. Colors available include black, dark heather, and navy. Feeling chilly? Just check out our latest hoodie with over 9 colors to choose from. Sip on some Brooklyn Cafe coffee with Dawn and Freddie in a matching mug as seen on set. Brooklyn hats and special seasonal items are always popping up and available upon request. To purchase, you can visit our online store at brooklyncafe.tv/shop. Happy shopping!
Pitch2Production comes back in 5, 4, 3. Hey, did you miss me? Okay, so welcome back to Pitch2Production. And now we're going to be talking about the scene list. So the reason why you write a scene list is so that when you write the script, you know which scenes are in which order, and it also helps you edit the scenes down before you write the script. Scripts take a bit of time. Surprisingly, even though it looks like it doesn't look like a novel, they do take a bit of time so that you understand the organic flow of the scene, and if there's dialogue, the organic flow of the conversation, right? So it does take a bit of editing back and forth. So scenes can help you with that. And after you finish the script, you will work on like storyboarding and shot lists and stuff like that. That'll be more on the production side, so stay tuned for the rest of the episodes in February. But scene lists, now for this story, I wanted to show Juji first and the character trait. So I wanted to go straight to Juji dropping off a book with obvious dog ears in the corners, right? I wanted to show like this is like an idiosyncrasy of, an idiosyncrasy of his. I didn't even say it right. Idiosyncrasy. Say it with, no, I'm kidding. But yeah, so he gives it to Kurt. Kurt takes the book and hands it to Calliope, so we already have the triangle of characters in the first like couple shots already, and she starts to unfold the pages. So if you remember in the log line, the obstacle was that Calliope is speechless, but it's also that Juji is forgettable, and that's why I put Juji notices Calliope. Calliope groans, but she doesn't notice him, and Juji stares for a bit too long, and Kurt makes him leave, establishing there's a conflict between Juji and Kurt. So I wanted, when I write a story, I like to establish the dynamics immediately. I like to do that rather than a slow burn of characters. I can see why people would do that to, you know, like if there's like, let's say a conflict and there's a character and everything goes well, and then they show that there's another character that underlines or cuts him or cuts them. So there's clearly a difference in dynamic of scene. But for this story, I wanted to show all of them, right? So we have established our characters, our conflict, and our dynamics. So now I have title card and pose. That's just a stylistic choice. I want to do that. It's a bit big and dramatic. Maybe I'll fix it in editing, but that's what I want to do. So scene 2. Before I move on, scene 1, even though it's 4 lines, it's probably going to be like a minute or 30 seconds or something, like 30 seconds to a minute, but it's more than it looks, and you'll see that when I show you the script next week. So next, Juji walks in to the library and sees that Calliope is behind the desk. So this is going to be shot in FAU library. So, and you'll see in the script how I describe it, but because this is just the treatment, this is written for me and just like, you know, people in my production team, but regardless. So if you go to FAU, there's an information desk, and like, as soon as you walk in, you see it, right? That's the first thing you see. So Calliope is behind the information desk, not Kurt. So Calliope is by herself. She's trying to communicate with another person, but the person doesn't try to communicate back. She smiles and is somewhat distraught. So I wanted to put focus on Calliope because a lot of romance is pretty one-sided. I want to say it's more like a character finds somebody and they learn more about that character, but the character themselves doesn't really have agency other than their backstory. So I wanted to show that Calliope is also her own person with her own struggles, so that this feels more realistic. It feels like 2 real people connecting at the end. So Juji sees this, like how sad. Calliope doesn't look sad because she's been this way, or she's experienced this for like 21 years, right? So she doesn't look sad, but he can tell by the energy of the air that like, oh, this is, you know, like not good. So Juji tries to walk up, takes out a notebook and writes, right? Oh, sorry, I fast forwarded. Juji sees this interaction and picks up a book and goes to Calliope. So he wants to talk to her one more time. And he tries to talk to her, like actually verbally talk. And remember when I said that this film, the goal is to not have any dialogue or very little dialogue? So I wanted to, with this shot, or with this part of the scene, have a POV shot of Calliope, which you'll see in the script. POV shot, so we understand that that Calliope is deaf before Juji even understands, right? So I just wanted to do that. That was my own choice. And she just stares, and that's where the first wall comes in. There's a lack of communication, or not lack of, but there is none. So Calliope returns her gaze to the book. I wanted to establish that she's done this so many times. So, you know, she's just used to it. Like, oh, maybe she sends him a note saying like, oh, Kurt can help. But that's in this, you know, if you don't see it here, you're going to see in the script. I'm just going to say it like that, right? So after that, she's expecting the Juji just to leave, right? But Juji slides back a paper saying, what are you reading, right? And I feel like that's like an organic way to open up a conversation. Like, what are you reading? Oh, I'm reading this. So they write together. They write back and forth, and they're getting into it. And this is when it starts, like, you know, like the feelings are starting to come up. Like, not love. This isn't really a story about like, oh, they love each other or getting married, but it's about communication and finding a likeliness in that. So yeah, like they pass notes back and forth, and they hit it off. Kurt gets Calliope to do something else because, again, they are librarians, so gets them to do something else, and that establishes an obstacle to Kurt. Kurt is a professional, so that's the second wall. Some days later, Juji sees Calliope moving through the library. So this is just interaction between Juji and Calliope, but they don't actually communicate because Calliope is so busy. She's zipping around the aisles carrying books, and Juji tries to stop her, talk to her, communicate with her, but he doesn't reach her. He bumps into Kurt, right? Classic fall down, pages everywhere. And they, you know, like this is a scene with Juji and Kurt. I didn't just want to have Kurt be like an obstacle. He is an obstacle. That's his function, but he's also a person too. So I wanted to have some scenes with just Juji and Kurt and just Calliope and Kurt, so we have a full triangle, right? So yeah, so they interact. It's clear antagonistic interaction because Juji tries to help him up. Kurt's like dismissive of him, but Kurt notices that he's interested in Calliope at this point. It's very early on where somebody's like, oh, I see that you have feelings and this is a known thing. Like Juji and Calliope, at this point, they're just like acquaintances to friends, not even to like romance options yet, right? So now we see Juji looking for a book, scanning different aisles, and they see Kurt again. So we already established that there's like a bit of a contention between Kurt and Juji, and it's a bit of a surprise, but Kurt helps him out a bit. Now why, if this is like a more realistic side, why would you think that Kurt helps him out? It's because he also cares about his coworker Calliope, not in like a romantic way, but he sees that he was there when Juji was trying to to communicate with her. He was there. So he sees that he's earnestly trying to talk to her. So he helps Juji just this once with an ASL book. And that establishes that Kurt is multidimensional, not just like, you will not talk to Calliope, right? So now we have Juji reads the book for a couple days, and he dog ears the pages. Again, I wanted to mark that idiosyncrasy. Idiosyncrasy means like a little habit. I wanted to mark that because that's special to Juji. And he goes to Calliope again, tries to sign. He only had it for like the ASL book, he only had it for like a couple days. So he's not going to be proficient in ASL, obviously. So when he does sign, she doesn't really understand what he's saying, but because she wants to talk to him, she like smiles, or the word I used, I think was, in the script, I think I used grimace, like an awkward grimace, because, you know, like she wants to communicate with somebody and he's trying, but they just still can't, no matter how hard he is trying at the moment. So he leaves, he's heartbroken, and this is probably the end of Act 2. So if we were to split this script up, or this treatment up in 3 acts, it'd be Act 1 ends with Calliope being dismissed by Kurt to do something, and they see that, and Juji sees that he's signing to her. Act 2 would end with this scene where it's like a heartbreak moment where he's trying to communicate with her, but she's just not understanding, or she can't understand, right? And now for Act 3, I don't want to show you Act 3 yet, because at the end of the month you will see the film for yourself. I want to show you guys that in premiere, so stay tuned for that. Now, just because we're done with looking at this treatment doesn't mean that we're done with the show. Next week we're going to be talking about scripts, and then we're going to be talking about actual production, which there's a lot of for this. So let's say I'll see you next week, and I hope you stay tuned. Please tell people about this, because the more you guys watch, the more I'm able to do, and I really want to do a lot and show you guys a lot, okay? So, as I like to end with every episode, stay tuned and let us know for this treatment, would you watch it? And that's a wrap. And we're out. You've been watching Pitch2Production. Join in next week as we keep the ball rolling and the ideas flowing.